I'll tell you a story about an apartment we rented in Napindantawi. There were multiple hair-raising incidents. This started way back in 2016, when a lot of killings happened because of the drug war. We were forced to move because my father was a well-known pusher and drug addict at our place in Pasi. I feared for my family's safety. That's why we rented this apartment in Tapindantawi. It is a 100-foot square meter 2-story apartment that has 2 rooms on the second floor. The rent was for only 5,000 pesos, which is quite cheap and a good deal. Or so we thought. The apartment we rented is built at the end of the road. That's why they call it Tumbok, which is considered as unlucky. It's said to attract bad energies. At first, we lived peacefully at our new apartment. But when they renovated the lot behind our house, which has a lot of trees, and flattened the land to give way to new residential lots, this is where the strange happenings began. My daughter, Mavis, was 3 years old that time. As a typical toddler, she's playful. We would often see her playing by herself, which is normal at her age. One day, as she was playing outside, we asked her to come in because we needed to go to a doctor's appointment that day. She said, "Eo ko umalis magagalit si Mika, maglalaro pado kami," which means, "I don't want to go. Mika will get mad. We are still playing." Me and my wife looked at each other, stunned with disbelief. My wife asked, "Anang sino si Mika?" meaning, "Who is Mika?" My daughter pointed outside and said, "Siya si Mika siya yung kalaro ko." She is Mika. She is my playmate. Every hair on my body raised, and I felt like my head is getting bigger because of fear. I immediately took Mavis, and I went upstairs and talked to my wife. We didn't see this Mika, but we certainly felt her presence from then on. When I was around 8 or 9, on weekends we would gather on the sofa and stay up until midnight, just watching TV shows or movies. At the end of the movies, they would play the national anthem, indicating that no more shows were airing for that night. My father would then wake my siblings and me to move to our bedrooms. Before heading to bed, we need to use the bathroom. However, I was too scared to go to the bathroom at night because it was always very dark, and there were a few steps from the sofa to the kitchen and then to the bathroom. So I decided to just go outside the door. It felt safer. I could still see my parents inside the house. I was sleepy, and as I looked around where we parked our car, behind it was our Sari store. Above the store stood a huge watery rose apple tree that had been there since my grandparents got married. As I gazed up to the roof, I saw what looked like figures that seemed human. As I focused, I realized it was a huge, dark-colored man sitting on a tree branch and swinging his right leg, almost like he was just chilling there. I froze in shock, recognizing him as a Kapre, a thing from Filipino folklore. Terrified, I rushed inside. My parents asked why I was so scared, but I couldn't explain it. I couldn't believe I'd seen something that I thought was just a story. As I near my 30s, I still wonder if it was real or just a sleepy illusion. But I know what I saw that night. I've never told anyone until now. My story involves a close friend from the office, who I shall refer to as Edna. Edna is what one would consider very sensitive to the otherworldly. From the stories that she shared to me and our friends, she could see ghosts and spirits ever since she was a child. I think she inherited this from her mother. I, on the other hand, do not consider myself sensitive, but I do acknowledge that some unexplainable occasions where I could smell things that aren't there, or nowhere near, like incense, flowers, or some earthly putrid smell. At other times, I could hear unexplainable noises and sounds. On my own, I attribute them to an active imagination, but when Edna comes into the scene, it's a bit hard to dismiss and makes me question, what if? And this is just one of our shared encounters. We were out on a 2-day team bonding activity, staying overnight on some remote mountain farm. This farm was a quaint collection of huts spread out and up the slopy mountainside. On the eastern side was a river, which can be accessed from the farm's side gate, and onwards to the south, behind the huts, was the forest. Upon arriving, we had a bit of time before the morning activity, so we explored the grounds. One of the first things I noticed were the dark, humanoid totems situated on tall wooden columns around the place. I saw one by the river gate, and then a few more scattered in the back of the farm, going towards the wooded area. I just dismissed the idea as a bit of ethnic embellishment to the farm. In the afternoon, we got more free time, so a few of us, including Edna, went upriver. We wanted to check out the waterfalls. The river was not too deep, so we could trek and wade across it. The trek upriver was fun since we talked amongst ourselves most of the way. But I remember feeling the rocky riverbanks foreboding and desolate. At some point, I surmised that the waterfall could be too far for me, so I decided to give up and get back to the farm. I went back to enter through the river gate, and again noted seeing one of the totems perched on top of a column as if standing guard. By dinner, everyone was back in the farm, and Edna and I and a few more friends, one of which I shall refer to as Yavin, decided to play some board games, talk, and have a few bottles of beer after dinner. We played until about 1 in the morning. Yeah, we love board games, and we decided to call it a night then. There were 7 or 8 of us staying in the same hut, some sleeping on beds, the others on sleeping mats, The hut was a wooden house on a slope, with the north side on stilts. There were 3 beds parallel to each other, and a loft with a few more sleeping mats in it. Edna chose the farthest bed, Yavin in the middle, while I took the bed nearest the door. The rest took the loft and some slept on mats on the floor. There was no air conditioner, and the windows were quite large. Overall, the hut was airy, well ventilated by the cool night air. I was able to take a few winks, and then it started. There was a high-pitched sound that was almost barely audible. Now, this being in the Philippines, there's a big chance that this was just a mountainside echo from someone singing karaoke out in the mountains. I considered that, and so I waited a few more minutes expecting the sound to abate, waiting for the next song to get cued. But it didn't. The sound continued. It had this ethereal quality to it, like a soft wail which carried a feeling of longing and anguish. And the sound seemed to emanate from the earth and the surrounding woods. Oddly, it still felt like I could pinpoint the direction it came from, which to me felt like she was walking back and forth in an arch, not coming nearer or farther, always just out from my point of hearing. The thought of it approaching scared me, and I couldn't sleep. Not to mention the wailing sound kept me awake. A few hours later, it must have been before dawn, it finally stopped, and I was able to sleep. Later, around 9 in the morning, I complained about not getting enough sleep. Edna looked at me and asked if I'd heard it. She heard it too, and it kept her from sleeping. Like me, she had just laid in her bed, forced to listen to the wail until it finally stopped. We asked Yavin, who was in the middle bed between ours, if he had heard anything that night. No, he slept right through it, apparently, not hearing a thing. While the rest of our friends slept peacefully, only Edna and I, despite each being on opposite sides from Yavin's bed, were able to hear it. Yavin should have heard it too. That baffled us. Edna and I looked around outside to see if we could get a general idea of the direction it came from. I saw those totems, and a thought came to my mind. Could it be that those totems are perimeter guardians? It seemed like whatever was making that sound could not get past it. I should have asked around what the totems are for, but I was too sleepy to bother, and quite unnerved then. The rest of the second day activity was unremarkable, and I was able to put it out of my mind. We all had fun and took a dip in the small adjoining pool by the outdoor dining area. And finally, we went home. I've read stories about wailing banshees and consider the local version of it. But those legends tell of a warning and impending doom. And no such events unfolded after hearing that sound. It's strange when certain events in our lives occur, and we blame it all to bad luck. What's funnier is The things that we do to counter the flow of bad energy that causes these so-called bad luck or bad events. At least, at that time I thought it was funny. Until my friend shared her experience. This story is about my friend and her jeepney ride going home. For those of you who don't know what jeepneys are, they are a popular means of public transportation in the Philippines. They were originally made from US military jeeps left over from World War II. They're well known for their flamboyant decoration and crowded seating. My friend went home late after finishing their school project. Now, since she lives within the vicinity of the UP Dillman campus, University of the Philippines, it was perfectly safe for her to take the jeepney going home. It was about midnight when she took the ride home, and she could not help but notice the driver kept glancing at her through his rearview mirror, and then he would turn to her. Now, all jeepneys have their own route. They do not take any turns. They must stick to their route, or else there is a chance that they would run into some cop trouble. What's odd about this jeepney ride, besides the eerie glances that the driver gave her from time to time, he was also taking turns in corners that he wasn't supposed to. Afraid of what the driver's plans are, she was even more afraid of her surroundings because it seemed as if she was in the middle of nowhere already. So instead of going down, she just stayed on the jeep. On the last turn the driver made, she noticed that they were back on the route that they were supposed to be on. Before reaching the end of the terminal, the driver turned to my friend and said, "I'm sorry if I scared you. It was not my intention. Could you do me a favor? Burn all your clothes when you get home." Wondering what was going on, my friend asked why he was acting so strange. The driver explained, "The reason why I kept glancing was because your head was not attached to your body when I looked at you through my rearview mirror. That's why I changed my route a while ago, hoping we could get away from it. Please burn your clothes when you get home. I think it's still with you." Upon arriving home, still shaking from fear, my friend took all her clothes and burned them. A few days later, she found out on the news that the jeepney driver died a day after that incident. It turned out, whatever was in that jeepney was not after her. Did you ever wonder how things came to be the way they are? Why some places give us this eerie feeling when we pass through them? Why we meet people who give us this uncomfortable feeling, even if they're not doing anything? Ever picked up money on the street or on a sidewalk? Lucky, huh? But did you ever wonder who it belonged to and why it was lying there in the first place? History was never my thing. For me, everything and anything bad from the past should be left there and should be forgotten through time. But what if you had a thing or an object that links you to an event that has happened in the past? Would you let it go? Or would you be thankful that you have it? This story took place on my grandmother's house, where I had my summer vacation. I love spending my time there because there is a lot that a person can do inside and outside of her house. She has a big pool, a big flat-screen TV, tennis and basketball court, and all the amenities that you could think of. That's why the 1980s looking cabinet that she had on the living room seemed a bit off or out of place. So I asked my grandmother where she got the cabinet and if it was new. She made a joke about it and told me, "It's from the 80s, dear. I doubt that is new." With a smile on her face, she told me that she just passed by an antique shop about 2 weeks ago when the cabinet caught her eyes. She thought it looked nice, so she bought it. I was having the time of my life. Everything was great. I had 2 weeks vacation time and I was only on my 3rd day. Everything was okay. Except for the loud thuds that kept me awake at night. I did not pay much attention to it though, because when I asked what that was, it turned out that some men were working on some renovations to the house next door. They were on tight schedules, so some of the men work even at night. Even though this sound that I'm hearing seemed different, I just took their word for it. I didn't want to ruin my time with thinking there were ghosts in the house. One evening, I was watching a late night movie when I heard those loud thuds again. This time it really seemed like they were coming from inside the house. I was worried, thinking it might be someone trying to break in. So I followed the sound, just to see. The sound seemed to be coming from the living room. The weird thing was, as I got closer to the sound, I could hear some screeching and some scratching noises after the thuds. What I saw next was the most horrifying thing that I have ever seen. No amount of scary movies or Hollywood effects could have prepared me for what I saw that night. It was an old lady, soaked with blood. I thought the loud thuds were footsteps, but it turned out those were her hands banging on the floor. The scratching sounds were from her long nails as she dragged herself across the room. She was crippled and she couldn't walk. It also seemed as if some of her bones were out of place because some of her body parts were deformed. She was crying out for help. She had no eyes, only a blue eerie light that seemed to be coming from the back of her head. I ran to the maid's quarters, given the fact that it was closer than where my grandmother's room was. I woke everyone up and I told them what I saw. When we came back, the floor was spotless, clean, nothing there. Next day, I convinced my grandmother of returning that cabinet to the store. Upon returning the cabinet, my grandmother asked who was the previous owner. It turned out that an old woman used to own the cabinet. One day, she just disappeared. Some say she went back to the States without anyone knowing. Some say she was brutally murdered. Some say she was beaten to death and was stashed somewhere. But no one actually knows what became of her. No evidence was located. No body was found either. Neither my grandmother nor I said a word. We were speechless, and we couldn't figure out what to do. We just left the cabinet there and went home. The weird thing about the story of the old lady was that no one even bothered to investigate her case. Her family just tried to make some money out of her belongings and that was it. But the weirdest part of all is that the people who hear this story sometimes claim that they see the old woman every now and then, begging for help, curled up inside their own cabinets.